This video sponsored by Squarespace. This story began with a search for a donor. I was looking for it for a long time, and in the end I had to turn to the official representative of Churmatrans in our city. The appearance and condition didn't really play a role, since only the platform will remain from the car and everything else will be done from scratch. So after long negotiations in the office of the company, we agreed on the price, after which we issued the documents and I called a tow truck. By the way, Andre Mainly, he will be engaged in this project, has exactly the same car but slightly modified. You see it in the frame, this is an Isuzu Mini. As a result, we started the car and drove to Andre's workshop. Here it will be built. After a quick inspection, it turned out that the previous owner had forgotten some things, so we sent them back to him. And we decided to do a little detailing of the interior before disassembling it. And so the salon was washed and even the smell from the previous owner was gone. Now you can do the dismantling. While Andre is doing this, I will tell you a little about the project. Once on the net, I came across such an illustration. According to legend, this is Volkswagen Transporter from the future. We will build an exact copy of such a car. I found and contacted the author of this project. His name is Artem Smirnov. Here is his Instagram. It turned out that there is only this picture there, and we will design the back part ourselves. And everything that can be seen in this illustration Artem allowed to copy and bring to life. Thanks to him. The next step after the salon is to dismantle all the windows and the windshield too. The glass suction cups didn't work at all, and Andre took a universal suction cup for dismantling. And then it started. Before cutting off the body, we remove everything that remains, not really regretting it, since the optics, lights and other elements will be made from scratch on our own. The dimensions of the drawn model of course do not exist, so we decided to base on the wheels and build a car around them. We estimated the 18th discs and realized that this was not enough. We made measurements and came to the conclusion that we need 22nd two-piece discs in any condition. Then we need to cut off the body completely, since it doesn't fit into our dimensions at all, and we will make a new frame. And the body itself will eventually be completely transparent in a circle. We decided to cut off the body piece by piece in order to make it easier to transport scrap metal. Well, after the roof, racks, fenders, in general, everything to the very foundation go to the waste. After we cut off all unnecessary, we have such a platform. After several days of wandering around the car with a tape measure, it became clear that the steering rack didn't fit into the dimensions at all, and the proportion is very important. Only if you follow it, it will turn out to make a living copy as similar as possible to the concept from the picture. Therefore, it was decided to move the steering rack and put it in place after the frame is ready. Accordingly, we will transfer it into the interior. There was even an idea to make the steering wheel not on the left but in the center. The body frame will be made of a metal profile. And you will have to cut it very decently. That is why such a bandsaw was purchased. It saws like clockwork, we can't get enough of it. The main power frame will be made of a metal profile, and we cut it into the required size. Well as needed, given that everything will be remade a couple of times in the process, then we cut it into some size. In order for us not to get a greenhouse on wheels, the sides should be made a little oval, which will definitely give the general appearance, and in general the car will look like a car. As you understand, we don't yet have a pipe bender, but we have ingenuity, and with the help of hydraulics and two supports we have a bended profile. As you can see, the scheme worked and all the elements are exactly the same. These will be our racks. Now you need to make a board from the racks. For this we cut such triangles or pyramids as you like. With their help we'll make a curving. Just a little patience and you will understand what I mean. After the triangle has taken its place, mark the shape with a template and cut along the line. Thus we make a curving of a rectangular profile. In order for everything to be according to feng shui, it's necessary to close the end. A caliper, a sheet of metal and 20 minutes of work. As a result, we have just such a structure which should be set according to the level and fixed directly to the platform. To do this we clean the frame of our donor since we will weld the frame to it. The next step, using a laser level, is to expose the base of the board. Probably this element can be called a threshold and we weld on it. We do the exact same procedure on the other side and our thresholds look like this. When we have thresholds ideally set in terms of symmetry and level, we can throw on the side frame, which is what Andre is doing. We make control measurements and in the end everything really came together perfectly. Glory to the laser level and a little to Andre. Now you can connect the two frames of the sides with each other. Since the roof will be completely transparent, we make minimum bulkheads on top. We also made them slightly curved in order to give volume to the roof. When we already have clear boundaries of the body, it's time to put the wheels in order to make the arches and, in general, get a finished outline around the entire perimeter. As I said, the whole car is built around the wheels since the 3D model of this project doesn't exist. And the only exact size that we could calculate is the size of the wheels. And based on them we designed the dimensions of the body. As a result we took 22 two-piece wheels. In most of the tire fitting places, by the way, the workers refused to shoe them. But there were guys who don't believe in impossible tasks and they did it in 15 minutes. As a result we have such slippers which we will refine in the future and they will look completely different. Of course these wheels don't fit the standard hub, therefore we went to the secret foreman for the manufacture of spacers. This is a temporary solution. In the future everything will be remade, but in order to continue with the bodywork we need to put the wheels in their places. An old pipe of a suitable diameter will serve as a spacer. We cut it as evenly as we can and level it on a lathe. The next step is to take these pancakes that were ordered in advance and weld them into the pipe using such a simple device which greatly facilitates the positioning process. We insert and understand that someone made a mistake with the dimensions. That is why we have a bolt pattern on the one side that fits the discs and it fits the hub on the other one. And after a day of work and the handful of nano rods, we have 4 such spacers that we still have to manage to put in place. And so the wheels of the right size and with the right offset are in place. Now you can deal with the wheel arches. And make sure you don't have to remake them. Although in such a matter you can never be sure of this. Based on previous experience, when we bent the racks and got an excellent result, we decided to bend the arches ourselves as well. We cut off the profile of the desired section and with the help of such adaptations we are trying to bend the arch. In general, a day of work, a bunch of spoiled profile, and we find ourselves in a workshop, where they have been doing this professionally and for a long time. 15 minutes and we have such rings which turn into arches with a slight wave of the angle grinder. Many know that in addition to creating unusual cars, our workshop also creates smart tables. Finally, we decided to make it for sale. Of course, no business can be successful without a working and usable website. It's possible to make such a website in approximately 10 minutes on the platform Squarespace, the sponsor of this video. For this you need to choose template and customize it for yourself. In a few clicks you can personalize your site. And what I like about Squarespace, the ability to see how the site will look on different platforms. It's easy to make changes and you don't need to be a programmer to set something on your website. Number of ready-made templates over 100. All of them are free and available in a choice. Also, all these templates have adaptive layout. All are made qualitatively and correctly displayed in all types of different devices. There's no problems with editing the site. Everything is clear even for novice users. Editing content may be performed by man not familiar with the layout of web pages and programming. The Squarespace base has many controls, animation, fonts. All this can be customized for yourself to create individual style that no one has. You can save 10% using code AccessGarage when ordering. The next day we decided to move the car outside in order to look at the proportions and scale in an open area, since it's difficult to assess the scale in the workshop objectively. As planned, the windshield will be completely panoramic to the floor, so we will remove the partition that you see. It was needed to position the two sides. And here you can clearly see that the side has a slightly curved shape, as I mentioned earlier. And as you can see, all the racks are ideally the same shape, which is very important for further work. In the next step we decided to remove the flooring in order to gain access to the frame from all sides and prepare the platforms that will accommodate all the components of the electric car. And so centimeter by centimeter. After 2 days of work we got to the engine compartment. And since we are planning to build an electric train, the internal combustion engine must be dismantled. And here again the forgotten things of the previous owner. I don't know if we did the right thing, since this chip tuning assured us that we would lose at least 100 forces to power. But we still insisted on our own and sent him to the previous owner. And we started dismantling. It remains to disconnect all fasteners, drain the oil and remove the engine with the transmission to the distant garage. This is what we are doing. In the meantime, we have access to the frame. In order for all this not to rust, it's necessary to prime the metal first, of course, having cleaned the frame. This is what Valera did. Overall the longerons and strengtheners are in fair condition with only a few corroded holes. We'll deal with them a little later. As I said, the long run is in a good condition. There are only 2 critical points that need to be patched up. That's what we are doing. When everything is sanded, patched up, we proceed to the primer, having previously, of course, thoroughly degreased the entire surface. Since the body was cleaned by hand, and not using sandblasting, it's impossible to be 100% sure of the result. Therefore we use zinc soil. It levels out our possible shortcomings and the body will serve for a very long time. As a result, the body will be slightly shorter than the one in the picture. This is due to the wheelbase. Let's just say we don't have a version long. But in terms of harmony, everything is okay. First, the camera greatly distorts the real picture. Secondly, so far we have a thin outline. After we make wide overlays and arches around the perimeter, everything will fall into place. We'll demonstrate this in the near future. Yes, indeed we made a mistake with the proportions. The main thing is to admit the mistake and try to fix it. To fix the error, we need to cut the car in half and lengthen it. But first we need to weld the struts so that the geometry would be preserved. This is what we are doing. By the time the last strut was welded, you can observe real teamwork. It's a pity that the guys have only one mask for both of them as well as intelligence given the following shots. Supports were welded along the entire perimeter. In the end, after we disconnect the two parts, they must remain in the same place. We do like this, from all sides 4 pieces per side. After the car has become an 8-legs car, we can do the dismemberment. First of all, we drill out the welding points. Pay attention to how the frame is connected at the factory, since we will try to repeat everything exactly this way but with an extension of 60 centimeters. After the spar is cut in half, we cut all the other elements. Yes, indeed, now is the time to fix this mistake, because with each new element, it would become less and less possible. At this stage, we can say that we got off easy. In order to lengthen the frame, we ordered 2 blanks that repeat the profile of the spar. With their help, we will lengthen the frame. We saw them lengthwise in order to repeat the factory execution, and we repeat it. Yes, there will most likely be a lot of questions about the location, but it was done exactly this way at the factory. On the one side it's inward and on the other one it's with an overlap. That's what we do, we weld the points exactly the same way as it was in the factory. The next step is to cut off all unnecessary and we have almost factory execution. Then we lengthen the sides, everything is simple and clear. After 2 days of work, we have a body 60 centimeters longer and the proportion that looks like it should. After all the spacers have been removed, it remains to prime all the implants. Now that we already have the exact dimensions, we can deal with the overlay that frames the body along the contour. First, we make a 3D model. It looks like this. And with the help of CNC and 2 sheets of Penaplex, we transfer them from the computer to offline. Of course, these elements will not be made of Penaplex. This way we just make the desired shape in order to mold them and make these elements from fiberglass. After the first batch of linings was ready, we made all the necessary measurements and realized how much we needed to make the bases on which the plexiglass will be put. While the CNC was sawing the next batch of linings, we began to make the very bases. First of all, we weld such a structure. Since in the corner of the body we have nothing to fix the profile on which the plexiglass will be put, this gusset perfectly solves the problem. And so on. We weld the structure along the entire board, which protrudes exactly to the thickness of the lining, -8 mm, since the sides will be sheathed with 8 mm plexiglass. We are engaged in door frames. Since we already have a ready-made doorway, we decided not to invent a bicycle and base on it. With the help of a band, so we make a lot of cuts in places where the profile will bend. And we go to the body. To obtain the same gap around the entire perimeter, we weld on such limiters. Then we apply the profile and give it the desired shape, starting from the shape of the opening. And then a few hours of welding. As you remember, the side racks are slightly curved to give volume and a more regular shape. So the door should repeat the same profile. Therefore, the adjoining side was also sawn and given a similar shape, which is what you see on the screen. And after a day of welding and fitting, we have a finished frame which remains to be freed from the limiters. We decided to use these loops. They worked for us just right. As a result, we also worked on the door in order to sheath it in the future and built in these hinges. Here is the result. It remains to clean the metal and prime. Of course the doors must be in contact with the sealing rubber. To do this we weld such an edge into the doorway, into which the sealing rubber fits perfectly. And in the end we have the following result. We did make very dubious spacers. Said that this was a temporary solution. And now the time has come. Now Valero will take off the wheel and we will be able to admire our invention again. Of course, you won't get far with such spacers. In general, ideally we don't need spacers. And the most correct solution would be to put an axle of the most suitable size, since we have already finished the body frame and we know the dimensions exactly. Meanwhile the guys took off the rear axle and suspension and went in search of the perfect axle. As a result, it took half a day for the trip and a new axle is in our workshop. And here the difference is clearly visible. We removed the panhard rod, cut out all the fasteners, cut out these cups, cut out the fasteners for the springs, and transfer them to the reverse side. The next step is to put the springs in their places. We drag the axle to them, and thus we clearly expose its future location, and we connect it by welding. After that, we disassemble everything again, weld the fasteners and move on. It has already become clear that the axle fits just perfectly. And this means that the detail fits into the project on a permanent basis, and we need to bring it into a more decent look. First, we remove rust and dirt with a brush roughly, and the next stage we get to the most inaccessible places with the help of a sandblaster. After everything is finished, we need to urgently primer and paint the part, since the polished surface very quickly begins to rust and decompose again. That's what we did. Changed the brakes, turned out new bushings, fingers that were worn out. We also replaced the springs. Painted on all the fasteners of the springs. The platforms for the springs, that's it, and the springs were also painted. I don't know if it was necessary or not, but at least it looks pretty nice now. And our further movements are the installation of all this kit set that we have prepared for this place. As a result, it took several hours to install, and in the end we have this result. The next step, we need to expand the beam. We will expand the beam, again, with any of our tools. This is a circular saw, and we connect all this with welding. After the beam is removed and we were congratulated on this, we need to clean it from rust in order to move on. We're getting a grinder, a brush, and several Valero hours.
So, what do we have? We cleaned this beam, cleaned the donor beam, and, unfortunately, it all rotted completely, so this is not our major, and we will immediately scrap it. As for this beam, if, well, it so happened that it is now alone, what can we do with her? The only thing that comes to mind is to cut it in the middle and enlarge the central part of the beam. And we will make the central part of the beam ourselves. Unfortunately, we do not see any other options yet. So, let's go.
In order to increase the beam, first of all we cut the profile into the desired size. Then we mark the core and drill the attachment points. After that, we measure the holes, take a larger step drill and drill more. The next step is to make inserts. We file a pipe of a suitable diameter, adjust the holes for it, and weld it. This is done in order to add strength. And after we connect the profile with screws, it will not deform. Now the most interesting part. We need to saw the beam, so much so that we can then expand it and assemble it, preserving the correct geometry. For this, in fact, these two tricky profiles were made. The next step is to prepare the mounting spaces. We mark up, cut off the excess. As a result, the profile will be attached to these holes. And in order to put it exactly on both sides and preserve the geometry, we make a flat platform. When the platforms are ready, we mark the beam exactly in the center, and then cut it. As you understand, inserting a piece of a donor beam is not an option, so we do custom. First of all, we unseam the metal. The next step is to fasten the profile to the beam, for now with bolts. And then we try it on the frame in place. Well, then sheet by sheet, bit by bit, seam by seam. The lower part will be welded with one solid sheet, so we remove the temporary profile and weld a permanent sheet. The next step is painting. First, an anti-corrosive primer, then a paint with a hammer effect. Similarly, we painted the rear axle. It turned out pretty, so we decided to repeat it here. The next day, the paint has dried and you can do the installation. As a result, we have a bunch of spare parts and 2 puzzled people. But during one Andre day and several Valère hours, everything slowly comes together. And as a result, the beam and suspension are in their places. As you remember, initially we bought these 3-part discs. This is not a random choice, because previously I wanted to upgrade them. Standard discs on a car from the future don't match, in my opinion. And besides, it has already become clear that we will not be allowed to drive this car on public roads. And, probably, it's for the best, because we can afford to implement the craziest ideas in this project. For example, such as joystick control and wheels with an infinity effect. Actually, that's what we did. We're on YouTube after all. First of all, we disassemble the disc. This was done by Andre. As a result, after 39 bolts are unscrewed, we remove the central part. We won't need it in the future. In the meantime, we took measurements and decided to first cut the probes out of plywood. Let me remind you that initially our major is woodworking, and we have a fully equipped carpentry workshop at hand. Before ordering expensive metal parts that we can't make ourselves yet, we try on a prototype made of wood that we can make ourselves. Practically free of charge. Everything is clear here. Plywood disc, 39 bolts, and half an hour of work. So, what did this wooden spacer give us? We understood what the disc would look like. While we are waiting for the cherished metal blanks, we can prepare the discs. Or rather, what's left of them. Specifically, an area consisting of 2 parts. As you can see, old chrome has decided to leave the chat and is only fit to bake potatoes in it. This often happens over time, when the metal is oxidized and the chrome peels off from the disc, but, in our case, it's even a plus. Firstly, such discs are much cheaper. And secondly, polishing chrome is a troublesome business. It is much easier to remove it like foil. After the chrome foil is mostly removed, we polish the rim.
We couldn't save the chrome, so we'll use this moment and paint these wonderful chrome things. Degrease, blow, and tape.
By the way, we had the idea to make these inserts transparent, made of polycarbonate. But googling this question, it became clear that such discs have already been made more than once, both by West Coast Customs and Garage 54. So we decided to go a little further. And while we went a little further, metal parts were cut out for us. Due to the limitations of the machine, I had to make 2 discs, 8mm thick each. As a result, we get a round piece, 16mm thick. But, in advance, they need to be painted, which means that they must first be prepared. As you can see, one of the discs has cutouts, and the second one is whole. This is done to facilitate the design. After everything is sanded, we degrease the blanks. The next step is priming. We use black soil and let's go. And in order for the painted parts to dry faster and work didn't stop, we used this homemade drying box. It's always warm, dry, and pleasant there. After all the elements have dried, we proceed to assemble. As you remember, the discs are 3-part, and the rim consists of 2 parts, and this joint must be reinforced so that the wheel is sealed and does not let out air. All our components are painted black and we are already starting to assemble the wheels. As a basis, we will take 2 metal discs 8 mm thick, 1 lightweight and 1 basic. The total thickness of the center will be 16 mm. I think that will be enough. In discs, we already have our loosening, which is necessary for us. Thus, we got rid of spacers. Twisting, turning, assembling. The next step, we pull all the parts together, and so 4 more times with 39 bolts. So, the discs are ready. As I said, in my understanding, standard discs do not quite fit into the concept of a car from the future, which is exactly what we are building. So I decided to quickly make a cool prototype in order to see how it will look like and arrange a vote. Is it worth making such discs or not? And in general, we decided to come to the concept of building a car together with you. That is, we put such things up to the vote and make decisions depending on the results of the vote. First of all, we separate the polycarbonate sheet. We put it in a laser machine and cut out a circle. In the future, I plan to insert this part into the disc. Something like a hood. We cut out this constructor from plywood. How does it work? The upper frame presses the plexiglass to the lower one through a wooden lens. First, we just put on the bolts and throw this sandwich into the drying cabinet. By that time, Valera had just vacated. An hour later, the workpiece is thoroughly warmed up, and we tighten the structure and leave it to cool. After the workpiece has cooled down, it has taken the desired shape, and we put it back into the laser machine in order to cut it to the right size, since we initially made a good stock. The next step is to take plexiglass 8 mm thick and make an engraving on it. We didn't bother much here, because this is a prototype made for fun. Everything is crooked and wrong here. But we will understand, and most importantly, we will show you what it might look like. The principle of infinite mirrors is used here. The technology is extremely simple and old, but I haven't seen it used in car discs. The next step, in the end of this plexiglass, we fasten the LED strip with the help of electrical tape. Then we put a conditional mirror in the disc. It has plexiglass with engraving and illumination. And the top cover, in the form of a lens, is glued with a mirror transparent film, and we close this sandwich. As a result, we have this thing. So, in the end, here is our draft prototype. As you understand, we made it. Out of crap and sticks, used the cheapest, simplest materials in order to just understand and show you how it will look like, approximately. But, of course, the quality of this light tunnel suffers greatly due to the fact that we used the wrong film, which does not take this spherical shape. Therefore, we need to decide now whether we are making such a concept or is it still childish with these lights. And this can only be decided by you. So, be sure to write comments, whether we do them or not. We have already figured out everything, and how to do it. Everything is thought out. Therefore, we are quite able to implement it nicely so that everything is beautiful. The question if it is necessary or not, so be sure to write in the comments. It is in your hands. The best way to help promote a video is to share it anywhere. Finally, we decided to put 1 sheet of plexiglass on a rough basis, in order to understand how close we are to the picture that we try to copy. We tint the plastic with the similar film. This is a temporary option in order to see that we're getting there. In the future, everything will be pasted over with another film and by specialists. Let me remind you that such projects become possible only thanks to your support. A like, a couple of long comments, and most importantly, share this video anywhere. All this helps a lot in promoting the video. You always help in promotion. Thank you very much and best wishes from the Axe.